1941, Egypt. 6 girls were raised as the same daughter, the Minya confession. It began, as many dark tales do, with a whisper. In the winter of 1941, Minya was a town that lived in shadows. Nestled along the Nile, its narrow streets echoed with the shuffle of sandals, the bleating of goats, the call to prayer rising and falling over stone walls. Life was simple, predictable, and above all, private. But beneath the calm, secrets moved like snakes in the dust. The secret began with a rumor. Quiet at first, almost unbelievable. A grocer's wife swore she saw 2 girls in different parts of town, both answering to the same name. Not only that, but they looked nearly identical in age, dressed in the same hand-sewn garments, each carrying the mannerisms of a daughter raised with care. "It cannot be," she whispered to a neighbor. But whispers in Minya traveled faster than the Nile in flood. Soon, the market stalls buzzed with hushed voices. Could it be true? 2 girls living separate lives, yet raised as the same child? The story grew stranger with every retelling. By dusk, 6 different families in 6 different corners of Minya had fallen under suspicion. The town held its breath. The girls were no more than 12 or 13, each tucked away behind shuttered windows, each fiercely guarded by mothers who never let them stray too far. People began to notice details that had never mattered before. The same sandals on different girls, the same ribbon tied just so, the same lullaby sung faintly at night. It was as though 6 mirrors had been scattered across Minya, reflecting the same daughter in 6 fragile bodies. But why and how? Some whispered it was witchcraft. Others swore it was a punishment from God. A few dared suggest the unthinkable, that the mothers of Minya had conspired together in a pact of silence, bound by a secret too dangerous to name. The tension grew unbearable. At night, the streets lay quiet, but the silence was heavy, as though the walls themselves held their breath. A lantern flickered in the window of one house. A door creaked in another. The town knew something unnatural had taken root, but no one dared knock, no one dared ask. Until one evening, when the Nile wind howled against the rooftops, a child's voice carried across the alleyways. "Why do they all call me by her name?" The words cut through the dark like a knife. The next morning, Minya awoke restless. Neighbors no longer met eyes. Men carried their worries to the mosque. Women clutched their daughters tighter than ever before. Some claimed they saw all 6 girls that day in different parts of the town, each dressed in plain cotton, each with the same narrow face, the same tired eyes. But one detail sent chills deep in any other. Every girl, without fail, answered to the same name. The whisper had grown into something much louder, something that could not be silenced. It was no longer rumor. It was fact. 6 girls, one identity, one impossible truth. And the town of Minya, whether ready or not, was about to uncover confession that would stain its memory forever. They were born in secret, or so the story goes. In 1941, war raged across continents, but in Minya, Egypt, the war was something distant, almost unreal. Here, the battles were quieter, fought behind closed doors, whispered under veils, hidden in the cries of newborns. The story of the 6 daughters began with births that should have been ordinary, yet they were anything but. Each mother gave birth within months of one another. Each birth was hidden from curious neighbors, concealed by silence and drawn curtains. In a town where every cough and every cry carried down the alleyways, silence was suspicious. And yet somehow, no one asked too many questions. What no one could deny was this. When the girls emerged into the world, each was presented with the same name. One name, 6 cradles. It wasn't coincidence. It was design. The name, whispered like a curse in later years, was meant to honor a woman long gone, perhaps a saint, perhaps a martyr. But in Minya, no one agreed on the origin. Some said the name belonged to a child lost to fever decades earlier. Others claimed it was chosen by a priest who carried guilt too heavy to speak aloud. But whatever its root, it bound the girls like invisible chains. Imagine the sight. 6 mothers, each holding a child they called by the same name, each raising her as if she alone had given birth to her. No woman admitted the others existed. No one acknowledged the duplication. It was as though the girls were fragments of a single ghost, scattered into 6 fragile lives. But why? What could drive women to such a pact? Some believed it was survival. Egypt in the 1940s was a land of uncertainty. Poverty haunted families. Disease stole children in the night. A single mother left without a husband could be ruined. Perhaps the name was a shield, a way to confuse fate, to trick death itself. If death came for one child, he would not know which one to take. Others whispered darker explanations. Some believed a crime lay at the center of it all. A stolen child, an affair concealed by shared lies. A man of influence who fathered more than one daughter, but demanded secrecy. By giving each child the same name, perhaps the mothers hoped to bury the truth under layers of sameness, until no one could untangle whose child belonged to whom. But secrets cannot be buried forever. The girls grew, and with growth came questions. They noticed the way their mothers stiffened when certain topics arose. They noticed the strange looks in the market, the murmurs behind their backs. They began to ask why other children teased them, calling them the shadow daughters or the reflections. But when they pressed for answers, their mothers shushed them with lullabies, as though music could erase doubt. By the time they reached their 12th year, their resemblance could no longer be ignored. They shared the same dark hair, the same hollow cheeks, the same weary eyes that seemed to carry an unspoken sadness. Even their laughter, when it came, sounded almost identical. To the town, it was no longer mystery. It was menace. By then, the story had spread beyond Minya. Priests spoke of it in sermons. Travelers carried the tale along the Nile. And with every telling, the question grew louder. How could 6 girls, raised in 6 different homes, all be the same daughter? And if they were not, then whose daughter was real? The answer would not stay hidden for long. The cracks in the pact were already showing. The silence was breaking. And soon, one careless slip would unleash the confession that changed everything. It stood on the edge of Minya, a house that no one liked to pass after dusk. Its shutters were always closed, its windows nailed from the inside. By day, it looked abandoned, dust gathering on the steps, the front gate leaning on broken hinges. But at night, lanterns flickered through the cracks, and shadows moved against the curtains. This was a house most closely tied to the mystery of the 6 daughters. People whispered that at least 2 of the girls lived there at different times, though no one could ever be certain. The mothers denied it. But neighbors swore they saw small figures in the upper window, watching silently as the street below carried on with life. It became known simply as the house with locked windows. The secrecy of the place was suffocating. Women who visited entered only under cover of darkness, their faces hidden by veils. Children dared each other to run past the gate, but none lingered. There were no sound to play, no voices of joy, only silence, heavy and unnatural. Inside, life was even stranger. The shutters kept out light, so the room smelled of candle smoke and damp air. Furniture was sparse, the floors bare, yet the cradle in the corner was always ready, lined with fresh linen, as though expecting a child that never stayed for long. Some claimed this was where the daughters were rotated, traded like secrets from one family to another. A child might arrive and live there for weeks, only to vanish and appear in a different household. No one could prove it, but the rumors were too persistent to ignore. And always, the same name followed. The house belonged to an old widow, a woman called Amrania. She had no children of her own, no husband, and no reason, at least publicly, to keep her shutters locked. But she guarded the house fiercely, chasing away anyone who strayed too close. It was said she kept records, though no one ever found them, pages of dates, names, and exchanges. If the mothers of Minya were bound by a pact, Amrania was its keeper. She was the one who ensured the silence held. She was the one who turned a blind eye when the impossible truth unfolded within her walls. But even she could not stop the whispers. The town began to watch the house more closely. One boy swore he saw 2 girls enter, but only one leave. A baker claimed he delivered bread there every morning, but never once heard a voice inside. A neighbor said he heard weeping late at night, muffled through the shutters, the kind of weeping that didn't belong to just one child. The mystery thickened. Was the house a refuge for unwanted children? A prison for stolen daughters? Or something darker still, a place where identities were erased and rewritten? Whatever it was, the mothers of Minya treated it with fear and reverence. They never spoke of it, never explained its purpose, but their silence said more than words ever could. One evening, a violent storm swept across the Nile. Winds howled, shutters rattled, and for the first time in years, one of the windows of the house blew open. For a brief moment, neighbors glimpsed the inside, candlelight flickering on pale faces. Two girls huddled together near the cradle, staring out into the storm. By morning, the window was nailed shut again, but the sight had confirmed what many already suspected. The house with locked windows was no ordinary home. It was the heart of the secret, the place where the lines between daughters blurred, and where the truth of their shared name was kept under lock and key. And soon, the house would no longer be able to hide what lived inside. They were women bound by silence. In Minya, every family had a story. Farmers spoke of harvest, merchants of trade, fishermen of the Nile's moods. But the mothers tied to the 6 daughters told nothing. They moved like shadows through the streets, their eyes cast down, their mouths shut even when questions pressed against them. It was not just shyness. It was not grief. It was something deeper, fear mixed with guilt, a silence so heavy it seemed rehearsed. Each of these women lived in separate homes, yet their lives looked strangely alike. Their daughters, all bearing the same name, were kept close, watched carefully, and rarely allowed to wander. The mothers would smile politely at neighbors, but never linger. At gatherings, they stood at the edges, speaking in half-sentences, never about their children. And if anyone dared to ask, "Why does your daughter share a name with another? Why does she look so much like the girl down the street?" the women's faces would stiffen. Their voices would lower to whispers. "It is nothing. You see wrong." But everyone knew they were hiding something. What tied them together was never written down. There was no contract, no signed pact. But the unspoken agreement between them was strong enough to withstand years of rumor. Each woman had reasons of her own, reasons she never confessed aloud. One had lost a baby before, and fear haunted her so deeply that when the chance came to share a child's name, she clung to it as if it would keep death confused. Another had been abandoned by her husband, left with nothing but shame. For her, being part of the strange sisterhood of silence gave her cover, protection, even if it meant raising a daughter who wasn't truly hers. A third, they said, had been the subject of scandal. Her pregnancy too suspicious, her belly swelling before marriage vows were complete. For her, the pact was a shield against disgrace. If 6 children carried the same name, then no one could point to hers and say she was guilty. Different wounds, different fears, but all stitched together by one terrible solution. At night, some neighbors claimed they saw these mothers gather, veiled, silent, moving quickly toward a house with locked windows. They never stayed long. A door would close, a candle flicker, and by dawn they would return home as if nothing had happened. Did they meet to pray? To plan? To switch the girls between households, so no one could trace who belonged where? No one knew for certain. But what became clear was this: the women were not victims of chance. They were participants in something larger, something deliberate. And still, they never spoke. Years passed, and the girls grew. They began to notice the cracks their mothers tried to hide. A child would return home, wearing a dress that didn't belong to her. Another would speak of a lullaby only a different mother could have sung. When pressed, the mothers denied everything, but the silence became unbearable for at least one of them. It is said that in the marketplace, on a hot afternoon heavy with flies and sweat, one mother let her guard slip. A merchant asked casually about her daughter's age, and she answered too quickly, giving an answer that did not match the others. The mistake was small, almost meaningless. Yet in Minya, small things grow into storms. By sunset, the town was alive with whispers. The silence of the mothers had protected them for years. But now, the first crack had formed. The pact was unraveling. It was a quiet morning, when the truth began to sink in. In one modest home along a dusty street of Minya, a mother stared at the child in her lap and felt a strange, sinking chill. The girl's eyes were wide, innocent, but there was something wrong, something subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to twist a mother's stomach into knots. This was not the child she had given birth to. She had held her carefully. She had sung to her, fed her, dressed her in linen as soft as a Nile breeze. Yet now, as she watched the girl trace her fingers over what grain of the table, she felt the gnawing terror of discovery. The child had the same name as hers, the same face she had looked into every morning, but it wasn't her daughter. How many times had she convinced herself it didn't matter? How many nights had she whispered the name into darkness, as if repetition could erase the lie? Now, the truth pressed down with the weight of the storm. The other mothers, too, had their moments of doubt. A stolen glance, a misremembered lullaby, a shared secret with a neighbor. Each knew the impossible truth, that the child in her arms might belong to another, that the daughter she thought was hers had been part of a web she could never fully untangle. It was a cruel puzzle. They had arranged the names, the households, the cradles, believing they could control fate, control perception, control even death. Yet control is fragile, and secrets have teeth. The girl herself began to sense it. Children are sharper than adults believe. She noticed how her mother flinched at certain questions, how hands would tighten around hers when someone mentioned the other girls, how visits to the market or the mosque seemed orchestrated, designed to avoid other children who shared her name. One afternoon, she asked innocently, "Why do I hear my name called by other mothers?" Her mother froze, the spoon she held clattering against the bowl. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The child's question had pierced the veil, and for a brief, terrifying moment, the mother felt the walls of her carefully built world crumble. And yet, even in that moment, love persisted. She had raised this child, and she could not deny her devotion. The girl's laughter, her small, curious hands, her clumsy steps, they were hers in every meaningful way. But the knowledge lingered, like ash in the throat. This was not the daughter she had given birth to. It was a cruel duality. Love and guilt tangled together, inseparable. Across the town, other mothers felt it too. The shared burden became heavier as the girls grew older. Each child carried traces of the others, mannerisms, expressions, the echo of names whispered in other homes. The town began to murmur strange resemblances, impossible coincidences, a pattern that could not be ignored. And slowly, inexorably, the delicate balance the mothers had maintained for years began to falter. Mistakes were made. Observations slipped. Questions went unanswered. The child who wasn't hers became the spark that threatened to ignite the entire secret. Because secrets, once seen, refused to hide forever. In Minya, the first hints of confession were already moving through the alleys, drifting across stone walls, settling like dust. And soon, the town would see the impossible truth in full. 6 daughters, one name, and a web of lies that would bind an entire community in disbelief and grief. It happened on a sweltering afternoon, the kind where the sun drags its heat across the Nile, and every stone wall seems to radiate fire. The market in Minya was crowded, merchants shouting over one another, goats weaving between baskets of dates, the smell of spices thick in the air. And there, amid the chaos, a secret broke. A mother, weary from years of careful deception, made a slip. She was haggling over cloth with a merchant she had trusted for years, trying to distract herself from the heat. She laughed nervously, wiping sweat from her brow, when someone mentioned a daughter, one of the girls she had raised in silence. Without thinking, without weighing the consequences, she muttered a phrase meant to clarify, meant to ease the merchant's curiosity. "I raise her as my own, but she is not really mine." The words hung in the air, heavy as stones. The merchant froze, the shawl slipping from his hands. Nearby, shoppers paused, sensing the sudden tension, though they did not yet know why. The confession spread faster than any market rumor should. Mothers' eyes darted nervously. Children stopped mid-step, sensing a shift in the air. The name, once safe, now carried weight, weight heavy with truth, heavy with betrayal, heavy with years of quiet fear. By evening, the town was ablaze with whispers. Doors were bolted earlier than usual. Windows were shuttered tight. The house with locked windows seemed to pulse with unease, as though it knew the veil of secrecy had been pierced. People began connecting dots they had ignored for years. 6 girls, 1 name. Overlapping visits. Lullabies that were not sung by their own mothers. And now this confession, a mother admitting her daughter wasn't truly hers. Minya, small and close-knit, had no room to hide from itself. The story reached every corner of the town. Shopkeepers murmured behind counters. Children repeated phrases they barely understood. Even the Nile seemed to carry the news, its current whispering past stone steps and market stalls like gossip in liquid form. The mothers gathered that night, huddled in secret rooms, their faces drawn and pale. Fear, guilt, and shame tangled like snakes within them. Some wept silently. Others glared at one another, accusing, blaming, pleading. It was clear the pack could not survive this. The balance of their shared deception had been shattered. And yet, there was a strange sense of relief. Years of tension, of careful rotation and guarded behavior, could not continue forever. One confession had opened the door to truth. It was terrifying, yes, but also somehow inevitable. The girls themselves began to sense the change. They noticed the hurried whispers, the mothers' secret meetings, the way villagers' eyes lingered just a moment too long. They were growing up in a town that was no longer blind to the impossible, and curiosity gnawed at them like a persistent wind. No one could say what would happen next. Would the mothers come clean fully? Would the girls finally understand their tangled history? Or would silence descend once more, burying the truth beneath layers of fear and obedience? That night, Minya slept uneasily. Lanterns flickered in windows. Dogs barked at nothing. The Nile flowed steadily, indifferent to human drama. And at the heart of it all, 6 girls lay in their cradles or beds now, older and restless, unaware that the first step toward revelation had already been taken. The confession at the market was small, almost casual, but it was enough. Enough to unravel years of secrecy, enough to awaken the town to the impossible reality that had been living quietly among them. And soon, the story would demand more than whispers. In Minya, the church was more than a place of worship. It was a keeper of truths. Its walls had absorbed centuries of confessions. Its pews had listened to sorrow, and its priest, a man of quiet authority, held records that stretched back decades. But nothing in his ledger prepared him for what the town had begun to uncover in 1941. The ledger was old, its pages yellowed and brittle. Baptism dates, names, parentage, everything recorded meticulously in ink that had faded but never vanished. One day, as rumors swirled through Minya like smoke, the priest opened the book to cross-check the daughters. What he found was impossible. 6 girls, all baptized under the same name, but with different parents listed on each page. Dates that overlapped, suggesting simultaneous births. Annotations in the margins that hinted at uncertainty. Initials crossed out, corrections made in hurried ink. The ledger did not lie, yet it revealed something that no one could easily accept. The same name had been given to multiple children, intentionally, and recorded formally by the church itself. The priest knew the weight of such records. To misrecord a child's name was minor. To record 6 girls as the same daughter bordered on the unbelievable. And yet here it was, staring back at him, black ink on pale paper, a testament to secrecy and deception. He called them mothers, one by one. The first arrived reluctantly, her veil drawn low, hands trembling. The priest showed her the ledger. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. She did not deny the entries. They were her truth, written in the ink of absolution and duty. Each mother faced the ledger the same way. Silence at first, then confession, slow and halting. Their pact was no longer invisible. It was etched into the book that had held generations of Minya's history. The town, of course, would never see these confessions. But the priest understood the ledger was now a living witness. And when secrets have witnesses, they cannot remain buried forever. Rumors escalated quickly. Children whispered to one another about their shared names. Villagers wondered why the priest had called the mothers individually. Each conversation was a thread, and soon the tapestry of deception became clear to those paying attention. The girls, meanwhile, noticed changes in their mother's behavior. Visits to the church became frequent. Certain prayers lingered longer, eyes cast down, hands clutching each other as though seeking courage. They did not yet know the ledger's revelations, but they sensed that the invisible web binding their lives was beginning to unravel. For the priest, the ledger became a moral compass and a burden. He could not erase what had been written. He could not undo the consequences of 6 lives intentionally entangled under one name. And yet he knew that by documenting the truth, he had preserved the chance for clarity, for confession, for resolution. If only the mothers could fully embrace it. But Minya was not ready. The town thrummed with unspoken tension. Every doorway seemed to hide a glance, every marketplace stall a whisper, and the ledger, safe behind the priest's desk, waited silently, a paper testament to human fear, love, and error. One night, the priest closed the book with a heavy sigh. Candlelight danced across the pages, flickering over the entries that had altered the town's course forever. In the shadows, he imagined the girls growing, learning, questioning, and perhaps one day understanding the full weight of the secret their mothers had carried for so long. The ledger had revealed the impossible truth, and in doing so, it set the stage for a confession that would shake Minya to its very foundations. The air was heavy that night in Minya, thick with humidity and anticipation. A storm had been brewing, and the wind swept down the narrow streets, rattling shutters and carrying whispers like drifting ash. Candlelight flickered in homes, casting long, nervous shadows that danced along the walls. It was the night everything would change. The mothers had gathered secretly, summoned by fear and the inexorable pull of truth. The priest's ledger had revealed the impossible. The market confession had loosened the tongues, and the tension that had lain dormant for years now pressed on them like a physical weight. They met in a dimly lit room above the house with locked windows, a space filled with the scent of wax, dust, and fear. No words were spoken at first. Each woman avoided the eyes of the others, shifting uneasily. The daughters, unaware of the meeting, slept in nearby rooms, dreaming the innocent dreams of childhood. And then the first mother spoke. Her voice trembled, almost swallowed by the storm outside. "I cannot carry this anymore," she whispered. "We cannot continue. The children, they deserve the truth." The others murmured, nodding silently. Fear wrestled with guilt in each heart, and yet beneath it was something new, relief. The shackles of secrecy had grown too heavy. One by one, the mothers confessed. Names, timelines, rotations of daughters between households. Details of why the pact was formed: poverty, fear, scandal, death. Each revelation seemed to echo in the small room, bouncing off walls like footsteps in a graveyard. The truth was stranger than any rumor. 6 girls, all living under the guise of one identity. Each mother playing a role in a story that had begun as necessity and had grown into a web of impossible lies. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the house, as if nature itself reacted to the weight of human deception. Candle flames flickered wildly, shadows stretching like elongated fingers, mirroring the reach of the mother's confessions. When the confessions were complete, silence fell, a heavy, trembling pause. Each woman felt exposed, raw, vulnerable. Yet there was also a sense of release. Years of fear, of orchestrating lies, of watching daughters grow under false pretenses, had come to an end. And then came the question no one had asked aloud. What now? Would the daughters be told? Would the town understand? Could these families survive the revelation without shattering completely? The storm answered in its own way. Rain pelted the rooftops, mingling with the sound of distant cries, of dogs barking, of shutters banging against their frames. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, waiting for dawn, waiting for the consequences of truth to ripple outward. By morning, Minya would never be the same. The story had begun to spread, as all stories do once freed from silence. The neighbors, the shopkeepers, even travelers passing through would hear fragments. Some true, some distorted, but enough to know that a remarkable, impossible secret had existed among them. The mothers emerged from the room pale, weary, but lighter. Each glance carried the weight of the past and a fragile hope for the future. They had faced the impossible, and in doing so, they had begun to reclaim their humanity. And in the rooms above, the girls slept on, unaware that the world they thought they knew was unraveling around them. For the first time, the truth had a chance to breathe. Not all stories in Minya ended in confession. Some ended in disappearance. After the night of confrontation, the town's uneasy peace was shattered further. 6 daughters had been bound by one identity for years, but the truth, once revealed, had consequences that no one could predict. Some girls began to vanish, slipping silently from homes, from streets, from the very memories of those who had raised them. The first disappearance was quiet. A neighbor noticed a girl missing one morning, her small sandals abandoned near the doorway. The mother claimed she had gone to fetch water, but hours passed, then days. Panic began to set in, a slow, gnawing dread that something darker than secrecy was at work. The second girl vanished under more mysterious circumstances. A sudden illness was whispered about, a fever, a fainting spell, but the truth was murkier. Some swore they saw her slip into the shadowed streets, heading toward the Nile, eyes wide with fear. Others said she had been taken by relatives from outside Minya, sent away to preserve the fragile secret. By the time the third girl disappeared, the town was gripped with fear. Mothers locked their doors early. Children were not allowed to play freely, and the marketplace felt like a stage for whispers and suspicion. People stopped asking questions. They feared answers too terrible to hear. The vanished daughters became ghosts in the town's collective memory. Their names were whispered cautiously, sometimes in prayer, sometimes in accusation. Parents wondered if their own children might follow. The rhythm of daily life in Minya slowed, warped by uncertainty and fear. And yet, even in absence, the girls left marks. The patterns of their lives, where they had slept, what they had worn, the small habits that differentiated them, remained in homes like relics of the impossible story. Mothers would gaze at empty cradles or abandoned toys, their guilt renewed with every glance. Some of the daughters were never found. Others returned years later, changed, silent, carrying with them an understanding too deep for a child's voice. They spoke little, their eyes reflecting the confusion, the fear, and the fractured identities they had endured. Each return, however, was a revelation. Families learned that the world outside Minya could not understand, could not contain. The secret of 6 girls raised as one. And yet, in the faces of the returned daughters, the mothers saw glimpses of hope, proof that even impossible stories could endure and survive. The vanished daughters became legend. Travelers passing through the town would hear fragments. A girl seen along the Nile, a shadow glimpsed in the marketplace, a child singing a lullaby not her own. Some stories were true, others imagined, but all carried the haunting reality of what had happened in Minya. And through it all, one fact remained undeniable. The truth could no longer be confined. Secrecy had failed, deception had faltered, and the town had been forced to face the consequences of years of silence. In the empty spaces where the daughters had been, Minya felt the weight of the past pressing down. It was a town forever changed, a place where shadows and whispers mingled with memory, where absence spoke louder than presence, and where a single impossible secret had shaped the lives of many. The vanished daughters were a reminder. Even when hidden, the truth moves. Even when silenced, it has power. And even when the world forgets, the memory of what happened lingers, forever etched into the streets, the shutters and the hearts of those who survived. Minya never forgot. Long after the 6 daughters grew into women, long after some had vanished and some had returned, the town carried the weight of their story. The houses, the streets, even the Nile itself seemed to hum with memory. Children grew up hearing fragments from elders, stories of shadows and names repeated, of mothers who had held daughters that were not their own. The legacy was not just in whispers. It was in the way the town approached secrecy, in the caution with which families spoke, in the heaviness of expectation and fear that lingered in every alleyway. Minya had learned a lesson etched deeper than stone or paper. The truth cannot be contained, no matter how carefully it is guarded. The 6 daughters, wherever they were, carried the legacy within them. Those who remained in Minya moved quietly through life, their steps careful, their voices soft, shaped by the impossible childhood they had endured. Those who returned after years of disappearance bore an even heavier burden. They had seen the world beyond the town, but the truth of their shared identity remained a shadow, one that could not be shared with anyone outside the intimate circle of memory. It was said that in quiet moments, the sisters would find each other, silently acknowledging the bond that had formed from necessity, fear, and love. No words could capture the depth of that connection. No explanation could satisfy the questions of the world outside Minya. They had been one, yet they were 6. The mothers, now aged, carried the legacy as well. Some sought forgiveness in prayer, others in silence. The house with locked windows eventually fell into disrepair, but the memory of what had happened within its walls remained vivid. It was a symbol of both protection and deception, of fear and devotion, of love twisted by circumstance. And the town? Minya endured, shaped indelibly by the story. Travelers would hear the tale, some skeptical, some horrified, all intrigued. It became part of the town's identity, a dark chapter that defined its history as much as a harvest or the flood of the Nile. Yet amid the shadow of secrecy and the pain of loss, there was also resilience. The daughters, the mothers, and the townspeople had endured something unimaginable. They had survived fear, deception, and disappearance. They had confronted impossible truths and lived to carry them forward. The legacy of Minya was not just sorrow. It was survival, the stubborn persistence of life in the face of human complexity. Even today, whispers linger in the streets of Minya. Visitors may sense in the tilt of old shutters, the echo of footsteps on empty cobblestones, the quiet rustle of leaves along the Nile. The story of 6 girls raised as the same daughter is a ghost in the town, a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply hidden, will find a way to be known. And so Minya's legacy endures, a town forever marked by one haunting secret, one impossible story, and the lives of 6 girls who were all, somehow, the same. A story of fear and devotion, of loss and revelation, of the enduring power of human bonds that cannot be broken. Even by time, even by deceit, even by absence, the town sleeps, the river flows, and the secret once whispered now belongs to history.